While I was in Berlin, invitations came from all over the place. The heads of neighboring countries all hoped to meet me, and President Blanc held my hand and asked me to come to Paris. There was also talk of attending the EU summit. I was having a hectic time meeting businessmen and politicians, and a Japanese came to my hotel. His name is Okamoto Takeo. He is none other than the foreign minister in charge of Japanese diplomacy. He is known as Prime Minister Okazaki's reconsideration, and he was famous for pouring out all sorts of remarks about the comfort women and forced labor issues. Long time no see. I looked a bit surprised. Neither Korea nor Japan, I didn't know that we would meet like this in Berlin. Maybe the other party didn't know either. I asked him, "Do you remember what you said to me when we met the other day?" Foreign Minister Okamoto had a bitter expression on his face. At the time of the Nishida securities crisis, he visited OTK company, but I sent him back in front of the front door. As I got into the car, he left me saying I'd regret it, but looking at the current situation, at least I don't think I have to regret it. "What did you come here for?" Foreign Minister Okamoto sighed. "What do you want? Is it because I think that the money and skills I have are the power I have?" His expression and demeanor looked very different from before. "It's not something I started. Does it matter what I want? What matters is what Japan wants. What the Japanese government wants is a speedy restoration of Japan-Korea relations. The dispute between the two countries is not mutually beneficial." I agree on that point. What about the order mistake at Nishida Securities? There will be no further demands for reparations or apologies from the government in the future. I nodded. It's so obvious. As there has already been precedent by the Supreme Court of Japan, I had no obligation to return it in the first place. Nevertheless, the reason they continued to put pressure on me was probably because they thought that they would be able to get some money back by putting the blame on me. You have to be strong to protect what you have. If there was no power, the Toyota stock would have returned sooner, and I would have visited this case first and bowed my head. Then I want to hear what CEO Kang Jin-Hu wants. I thought for a moment and then said, I don't really want anything. But as a citizen, I want Korea-Japan relations to return to what they used to be. Chief Cabinet Secretary Hayashi of Japan made the announcement in front of the press. For the development of Japan-Korea relations, Japan will proactively review the issue of comfort women and forced labor, and continue to engage in dialogue. In addition, the Japanese government clearly states that it is continuing the Kono Statement and Murayama Statement, which acknowledged responsibility for war crimes. The Blue House immediately welcomed Japan's decision and responded by urging each other to work together for friendly Korea-Japan relations. Prime Minister Okazaki called President Ha Chong-min, and the two talked for nearly an hour and agreed to hold a Korea-Japan summit as soon as possible. As Japan, which had been denying the past, turned to acknowledging responsibility, approval ratings for the president and the new political party rose sharply. Other opposition parties also made welcome comments. However, the Liberal People's Party could not contain its embarrassment. In the meantime, the government has been criticizing the government, saying that raising the issue of the past causes division of the people, but the Japanese side has acknowledged the responsibility. During the meeting, Seo Yun Nakyung heard the news and quickly said something else. I think the role of the members of the Liberal Nationalist Party was very important in bringing about a change in Japan's attitude towards the issue of comfort women and forced labor. In the meantime, despite the malicious and biased reports of the media, the efforts of our party members to normalize Korea-Japan relations have turned into diplomatic achievements. Shouts erupted here and there at the absurd remarks, and the meeting hall turned into a mess. Above the head of Seo Yun Nakyung, a banner with the words "Return of the Japanese Liberal Democratic Party to the Regime and Establishment of the Supremacy of the Liberal Democratic Party of Prime Minister Okazaki" was flying around. What did you do with a spoon? What did the Liberal People's Party do? Then is it all thanks to the Blue House and the new political party? No, they didn't do anything. Jin Ho Kong did everything. By the way, what is that banner? That's synthetic, right? Of course it's synthetic. You bastards of the left-leaning media outlets. To criticize the patriotic conservative Liberal People's Party with such a composite photo. They should be sued for spreading false information and fed beans. I can't believe it, but it's real. Wow. Does that make sense? This is not some kind of Japanese parliament. But after Kang Jin-ho, he's really amazing. Did she water Japan alone? It's so important that she has capital and advanced technology. Hey, I ended up eating all of the money, over 2 trillion yen, without paying a penny in compensation. Take it off. If Jiang Jinhu had the Toyota stock, she would have had room to negotiate. But she sold everything in the hall, took the money and left. It is virtually impossible to return it now. Yun Kazaki, my heart hurts TT. It's time for the Liberal People's Party to stand up for Japan. I have to resign from my office as a sign of protest. Yes. I hope that Seo Yun Nakyung will shave his head first and fight against the government. Japan secretly lifted sanctions after the announcement, and container ships loaded with materials and parts quickly crossed the Korea Strait. As Korea-Japan relations turned to thaw mode, Russia and China also changed their attitudes. Rosatom decided to re-engage Japanese nuclear companies in the TWR project, and China softened anti-Japanese sentiment and allowed Japanese group tours again. European and American automakers who were noticing, again ordered parts from Japanese companies, and related companies in Japan breathed a sigh of relief. Japan was also generally welcoming, but only Kato Nakamura, president of the Japan Innovation Association, raised his voice and criticized Prime Minister Okazaki and South Korea. This is Japan's humiliating diplomacy. Aren't you ashamed to bow your head to Korea? The sanctions cannot be lifted until we receive an apology and reparation from South Korea. Up until now, supporters responded with every remark, but this time it was the other way around. Even so, the situation is different when it is being hit and when it is being hit. The Japanese management group issued a joint statement and strongly criticized the Japan Innovation Association. What else can you gain from self-sanction? Why do we continue to impose sanctions that only hurt Japanese companies? Why don't you know that Korea isn't as friendly as it used to be? Governor Kato, don't just keep talking and even wear robes as a protest. I got a call from Taekyu. What? Why are you quitting already? Seo Yun Nakyung, don't drive Japan as an outsider, so you stop? Did you say that? I didn't even pay attention to what the Liberal People's Party was saying, so I didn't know. It's time to stop. Even Ronald told me to do it in moderation. Ronald was forcibly preventing the Washington government from moving with the Japanese lobby. If the dispute escalated, the United States would arbitrate. It's a pity. It would have been really fun if this had gone to the end. It wouldn't have been much fun. Think about what happened during the Senkaku Islands conflict. In 2010, Japan arrested a Chinese captain while fishing in the Senkaku Islands, which China protested fiercely. As usual, the Chinese government pressured the Japanese government with a ban on tourism to Japan and a ban on the export of rare earths. And in the end, Japan released the Chinese captain without punishment. However, China went one step further and demanded an apology and compensation from the government level, and Japan bowed its head. So far, it seems that China has achieved a perfect victory, but in reality it is not. Relations between the two countries deteriorated dramatically due to this incident, and the Japanese were outraged as they called humiliating diplomacy. The approval rating of the Democratic Party, which barely took power, plummeted, which eventually led to the re-establishment of the LDP and the emergence of Prime Minister Okazaki. From China's point of view, it means that it has a self-reliant force to overthrow a regime friendly to its own country. And knowing that China could always use rare earth as a weapon to oppress Japan, Japan significantly reduced its imports of rare earths from China by diversifying its import sources and developing technologies to extract rare earths from waste electronic components. Exiting due to uncertainty, the Chinese economy was hit hard. If I don't stop, Japan will come out like that. Let's go all the way. So at this point it would be better to hold the outstretched hand pretending not to win. Do I really have to die if I tell you that Japan is dying? As it is said that Korea is the only country in the world that considers Japan funny, Japan's economic power is actually absurd. Well, Oriental island countries have a higher GDP than Germany, England, and France. And it has a huge domestic market. It is not a country that will easily stumble just because it falls behind in nuclear power plants or automobiles. In one way or another, Japan is an important partner of Korea. Not to mention the diplomatic and military fields, especially economically. It's not good for Korea if the relationship gets worse. Read more at wuxiax.com. Trade is not a zero-sum game where one party loses and the other gains. Just as logistics creates added value, trade benefits both parties. It is thanks to Korea that Japan became the world's second largest economy in the first place. There was a special feature of the Korean War, but after that the Korean economy grew tremendously enough to be called a miracle on the Han River. For Japan, a huge market has been created right next to it. To put it bluntly, even if it were to say that the profits gained from the exploitation of colonial rule were not compared with the profits gained through trade afterwards. In fact, the colonial rule of the great powers during imperialism was not very profitable. The colony's infrastructure construction and management cost more, and the development of the colony put the development of the home country behind the scenes. The reasons for the disappearance of colonialism are the same as the reasons for the disappearance of slaves. It is better to hire a voluntary worker with a salary than to employ a slave who doesn't like to work and only wants to run away while monitoring him. More importantly, slaves don't consume, but workers fuel businesses through consumption. Likewise, it is much more efficient to grow the economy and take profits through trade than to rob other countries with a gun and knife through colonial rule. When a poor country can make a living, the people of that country buy clothes, smartphones, and cars. And to use smartphones, base stations must be built and roads must be built to ride cars. That is how a new market is created. Developed countries provide various support to developing countries to help them grow, not because they are good but because it is beneficial. Just as South Korea, which received aid from the United States, is now an important ally of the United States. The United States is also the United States, but there was no intention from the beginning that Russia would completely exclude Japan from the TWR project or allow Japanese capital to flow out. In order to gain an edge in economic cooperation and territorial disputes, I just adjusted it to my rhythm for a while. Thanks to each other we got good results. President Vysotsky is also satisfied with his approval rating has risen significantly. Taekyu wiped his mouth. Zep, then there is nothing I can do about it. So, are you going to stop negotiating purchases with Europeans now? What are you talking about? That's it, and this is just the beginning. Again, the trade deficit with Japan is 30 trillion won in 1 year alone. Of course, it is actually a profit to make money by processing and assembling imported materials and parts and selling them to other countries, but the high dependence on trade is a serious problem. Whatever the relationship between Korea and Japan, the plan to diversify import sources remains the same. Just as Japan diversified import sources and developed technologies when China banned exports of rare earths, Korea needs to do the same. As Japan lifted sanctions, it is now urgent for European companies. Korean buyers can now compete with both sides and sign a contract with the one offering better conditions. Are you smart? Actually, it's not my opinion. This was Hyunju Nuna's idea. Hyunju Nuna expected things like this and he told me what to do next. I'm not even foresight, but it's amazing that I got it right. After all, the Golden Gate branch manager is not for everyone. Kang Jin-hoo's arrival was an issue not only in Germany but also in Europe. Not surprisingly, he is young and has the most wealth in the world. With that amount of money, it would be possible to move the country. It can be seen from the fact that Korea's international position has changed due to Kang Jin-hoo's existence. The most important thing is that she is still single. European royalty, aristocrats and wealthy people all paid attention to Kang Jin-hoo, and celebrities, models, and ordinary women also dreamed of a Cinderella story. Inviting him to a party or taking his daughter to a meeting, he uses various methods to attract attention after the earthquake. But he always brings his lover with him. And the lover has a beauty enough to be a model in Paris or Milan. It is a known fact that the two are living together. Of course, a romantic relationship is something that can be broken up at any time. Because we kept going together and working together, the women couldn't even get a chance to approach them. Then everyone thought of this. Is the deputy chief not coming? I want to see the deputy representative. A second person is fine. It's not as good as Jinhu Kong, but he's also the second richest person in the world. If you know it, there is a saying that it's real money. If I go to Korea, will I be able to meet you? The person who was not aware of this fact was lying on the sofa and having a happy time. In the economy, monopoly is evil, because it undermines the basic principles of the market. However, if you look, there are quite a few companies that enjoy a monopoly position. Microsoft's Windows, Google's search engine and Andromeda, Adobe's application software, Intel's computer CPU, Qualcomm's smartphone AP, etc. Keris also has a monopoly on autonomous driving, but we are following the same strategy of selling software as Microsoft. Therefore, other car companies can use Keris software as much as they want by paying a certain amount. Of course, a car is more expensive than a computer, so you have to pay that much. It is the company's choice whether to enter the Keris ecosystem like GM, Ford, and Unsung Motors or create its own ecosystem. German automakers met every day for a meeting. After Keris started solo, the three German companies have been working together to develop autonomous driving and electric vehicles. In the meantime, I thought that I would be able to pursue as much as I could because I was proud of the technological prowess of German cars. But the results were not good. In fact, there is no need to talk about the technological prowess of German cars. Not only the engine and mission but also the design, various options and convenience devices are unmatched by anyone. Although Keris has developed a lot, it is still a long way from Benz or BMW in terms of luxury such as interior finish and leather texture. But that's it, and it's a different story when it comes to autonomous driving technology and battery technology. The three German companies have also completed self-driving car tests in several countries, but have not yet reached the stage of mass production. On the other hand, Keris has already been piloting driverless taxis and continues to widen the technology gap. Everyone clicked inwardly. Who would have imagined that the three traditional German companies would be defeated by a startup? It's just that the timing of the change is a little late. Although Keris is currently exporting to Europe, there is not much export volume due to the focus on the US market. It is difficult to meet the demand in the North American market with the launch of a new car, so there is a limit to increasing exports in the future. But right now, awareness is more important than sales. The Carlos has clearly imprinted the image of the most cutting-edge technology car in Europe. Although it has not yet released a large luxury car model, it is highly likely that it will enter the market. Even if Keris focuses on the North American market, GM, Ford, and Unsung have dozens of factories in Europe. What will happen if the OTK battery supply and demand situation improves and all of these factories are converted to electric vehicle factories? In addition, the EU has stricter environmental regulations than other countries, and is sparing no support to increase the number of eco-friendly vehicles. Germany will do whatever it takes to protect its companies, but other EU countries won't. In France, even the president has already taken an active role in alliance with Carlos. The reason Japan changed its attitude this time was also because of the power that Keris had in the automobile industry. With everyone unable to make a decision, BMW Group chairman Tobias Hilbert said, "There is no more time to hesitate. Over time we may end up clinging to Keris. We need to quickly establish a technological alliance and preempt high-end cars that Keris has not entered in the autonomous electric vehicle market." The BMW Group has continued to have a relationship with the Seosung Group, such as using Seosung SB batteries in the past, and there was a personal acquaintance between Chairman Hilbert and Chairman Im Jin-young. However, Daimler AG Chairman Gunter Hartmann and Volkswagen Group Chairman George Rohr had slightly different opinions. Daimler AG was in the position that it should invest more in developing its own technology, and the Volkswagen Group was in the position that it should never accept OTK batteries as much as in autonomous driving. The three companies decided to continue pursuing joint cooperation, but decided to follow their own paths. Chairman Im Jin-young met European automakers and conducted sales. Just as Qualcomm can sell more APs as the spread of smartphones increases, the more self-driving electric vehicles, the more Susong Electronics and Susong SB will benefit. So the president himself will be running hard with his feet. The trade dispute between Korea and Japan ended with Japan taking a step back, but the level of economic cooperation between Korea and the EU grew bigger. The scope of cooperation has greatly increased from the original purpose of precision machinery, materials, and parts to the fields of culture, tourism, and finance. It was difficult to find a hotel room as executives of EU companies flocked to Berlin. Requests to meet were lined up from all over the place. Among them were invitations from royal families or noble families. The King of the Netherlands, the King of Spain, the King of Denmark, the King of Belgium, the Archduke of Luxembourg, etc. Although the privileges of the nobility have disappeared, titles remain in some countries. How amazing! In the 21st century, royalty or aristocrats? Ellie smiled. Why are you doing this all over again? I even met the King of Norway. The history of the rich in Korea is only a few decades. In the meantime, the chaebols have built their own strongholds. However, European royalty and nobles have inherited the honor from a long time ago, and the rich have also built wealth for hundreds of years. As such, the class is fixed and it is very difficult to get into it. How would you feel if you had a title like a king or a grand duke? Isn't Jinhu much better than a king with no power and only honor? So everyone wants to meet like this. It seems like everyone is trying to do something with Jinhu. Strangely, everywhere they went, beauties abounded. As long as I'm with Ellie, I didn't do any work. Ellie said as if giving her pint glass. I wish Jinhu would be good. She is popular. I laughed bitterly. It's all about money. If it wasn't for money, would you have paid any attention to an Asian young man? While I was in Berlin, anti-refugee protests broke out again in Europe. Because the two events happened almost simultaneously. One was when a boat with refugees overturned while crossing the Mediterranean, killing about 50 people including children. The exact number of deaths has not yet been recorded, and the bodies of children are still being washed up on the beach. Another is the case of gang rape of refugees in Germany. The victim was a university student and was known to have volunteered for refugees, so the Germans were even more shocked. As a result, negative public opinion about refugees was simmering, and Prime Minister Mader's approval rating for accepting refugees fell sharply. Europe is as close to Africa as the Middle East and the Mediterranean Sea. As it is Europe just across the Mediterranean Sea, many refugees have crossed over by boat to escape dictatorship, hunger, and civil war. The burgeoning number of refugees has been Europe's headache. The EU has the Schengen Treaty guaranteeing freedom of movement, and border movement between member states is free. However, unlike Europeans who share the common values of Christianity and democracy even though they speak different languages, refugees from the Middle East and Africa differ greatly in race, language, religion, and culture. Prime Minister Maders has repeatedly appealed to EU countries to host refugees. It is not necessarily a humanitarian dimension, and as in most advanced countries, Europe is suffering from a low birth rate and an aging population. Therefore, refugee labor is needed for simple jobs. But even in Germany, where the economy is the best in the EU, the opposition is so strong. What will other countries do? The EU, which is no longer able to afford it, is giving Turkey a large amount of subsidy to accept refugees, barely preventing them from entering Europe. Turkey is taking the money and threatening to stop accepting refugees whenever there is a conflict with the EU, said Ellie. After all, the UK also left the EU because of the refugee issue. There are many factors in Brexit, but the refugee quota plays a large part among them. In retrospect, the political unrest in Africa and the Middle East is largely to blame for the European countries that previously colonized them, especially Britain. But now it has come back as a boomerang of refugees. Korea was also noisy last time because of refugees. Right. I just thought it was someone else's business. Dozens of Syrian refugees from South Korea also entered the country and applied for refugee status, which became a social issue. I was thinking about what the civil war in another country had to do with us, but suddenly sparks splattered here. Read more at wuxiax.com. The enjoyment of rights in the international community comes with responsibilities and obligations. Even in countries with lower economic power than Korea, it is difficult to deny that only South Korea will not accept refugees. However, South Korea is already dealing with a huge number of refugees called North Korean defectors. In addition, there is a realistic problem of cost to accept even Middle Eastern refugees. In fact, the most effective way to stop refugees is to stabilize the situation in their home country, such as ending the civil war. Then there will be no more refugees and the refugees will return. However, the international community is not using much of its power. I muttered as I looked at the pictures of the beach in the newspaper. The world is not fair. Children cannot choose their nationality. I also didn't become Korean because I wanted to, I was just born in Korea. Just because you were born in a developed country, you can enjoy many rights such as medical care, education, and employment. However, if you are born in a country in a civil war, you become a refugee. What the hell did those kids do wrong? If I could make more money, would I be able to solve those problems? Ellie shook her head. No. No matter how much money you have, you can't solve all the problems in the world. I smiled bitterly. Is that so too? Ellie hugged me from behind and said, but we can make the world a better place. A person can live with just a little hope. Can I do that? Of course. If it's Jin-Hu, it can be clear. My role in Europe is over. I told the business people to take care of the rest of the day and I decided to return to Korea. I finally met and talked to the French president and the executives. President Blanc said frankly, calling for increased investment in France. Europe faces a number of problems. But no matter what difficulties we face, we will continue to uphold the value of a united Europe. Division and strife produce nothing. If it was a lesson learned from the 2 world wars, it would be a lesson. I nodded. I will spare no effort in helping Europe to integrate and develop. Jin-Ho Kang's achievements in Europe were enormous. He took the trade dispute with Japan as an opportunity and promoted economic cooperation with the EU, thanks to which Korean companies were able to easily expand their sales channels in Europe. Economic cooperation also led to cultural exchange. At the same time in Europe, this coincided with the Korean wave, and the number of students learning Korean or studying Korea increased significantly. The stock prices of listed companies soared day after day, and foreign appraisers rushed to boost Korea's economic growth. When the economy is improving, no one hates it. However, the political parties of the ruling and opposition parties looked at it with a shaky expression. A single entrepreneur went and did a job that had not yielded any significant results despite the president's European tour and various government-level cooperation promotions. The government quickly streamlined customs procedures and offered financial support to small and medium-sized enterprises, but it was nothing more than a spoonful of what Jin-Hu Kang did. Famous CEOs and investors can make stocks rise and fall with a single word. If Jin-Ho Kang had a greater influence than them, it would be great but not small. However, compared to his wealth and fame, he did not exercise much power in Korea, so politicians went wild and rampant in the meantime. After all, is there a saying in the world that only Korean politicians are funny after the earthquake? Still, this was enough to change my mind. I finally realized how stupid it is to be hostile to Kang Jin-Hu. Not only politicians but also the bureaucracy were shocked. As in the case of the leisure department, Everyone was careful not to scratch and scrape Kang Jin-ho, who is standing still. In the past, during the Park Si-hyung administration, the Ministry of National Defense operated a cyber psychological flyer with the National Intelligence Service. The Cyber Command has performed important tasks in cybersecurity, protecting the safety of the nation and the people, defending against enemy attacks, preventing the spread of communism, and instilling security awareness in the people. Its mission was to comment on the internet. Posts supporting the regime at the time and having a conservative color were recommended, along with comments of praise and sympathy, and all kinds of malicious comments were added to criticisms of the regime or progressive writings. He did not hesitate to speak out and criticize a specific area. Cyber Command's targets included progressive politicians, activists for civic groups, cultural artists, and Kang Jin-ho. This is because Kang Jin-ho is a pro-North Korean leftist that threatens the security of the Republic of Korea. This is not because the order came from the Blue House. Until then, no one could have imagined that Kang Jin-ho's influence would grow this much. Had he known, he wouldn't have had a knife in his neck. However, the government has changed and the Cyber Command has become the subject of investigation. They quickly deleted the relevant materials and concealed the evidence, but they could not avoid responsibility just because they were revealed in the course of the investigation. The people were shocked to learn that the military had been eagerly posting comments, ignoring the duty of political neutrality and national defense. As former President Park Si-hyung, who can be said to have taken the lead, was arrested, the problem was settled, but the problem is that the comments left at that time are still circulating on the internet. Even now, if you search for comments on Cyber Command, you will find related materials one after another. It contained accusations and swearing after the earthquake, as well as personal attacks on her deceased father and single mother. Moreover, after Kang Jin-ho, while serving in the military, there was a time when he was caught up in a mortar explosion and almost died. If Jin-ho Kang starts to bring up these issues again, it will be a headache. Therefore, the Ministry of National Defense felt the need to take countermeasures in this regard. Defense Minister Bae paid an opportunity to play golf with his 6-year-old generals. He quietly spoke out on the spot. The previous minister was doing something wrong, so we are in a difficult situation. If something bad comes out about the Ministry of National Defense for nothing because it has already passed, isn't there a risk that the morale of the soldiers will drop and the military power will be weakened? With those words, one of them expressed concern. Yes. People are bound to be swayed by public opinion. There is a tendency for left-leaning reporters to inflate little things in the military, saying it's all about his freedom of the press. Jin-ho Kang is a world-famous celebrity. If he starts to bring those issues up again, he is likely to become a global issue. Defense Minister Bae Yunbong sighed. Anyway, I have a previous job, so how can I improve the relationship? Wouldn't it be best to cooperate on defense? But isn't OTK Company not involved in the defense industry? OTK Company's main focus is autonomous driving and batteries. However, Karis does not manufacture military vehicles. That doesn't mean he can't ask you to build self-driving tanks or electric armored vehicles. The next major focus is face it, but this is impossible in the first place. Among them, Brigadier General visiting Sue, the youngest, had an idea. How about the game? Game? Are you talking about children's entertainment? That's right. If it's a game for young kids these days. No, don't you like it a lot? When it's time for personal maintenance, private soldiers and sergeants alike rush to the dead areas and play games. In a recent research report, I found that promoting the military through games would be of great help. I read the report too. These days, it is said that promoting through social media or games is much more effective than advertising on TV or newspapers. Doesn't Jin-ho Kang own a game company? So, why not ask him to make a game for the defense promotion? Defense Minister Bae slapped his knee. That's right. He too had read the research report. Why didn't I think of this idea earlier? How much will it cost? According to the research report, about 5 billion won is needed. What? 5 billion. Then there was an objection. To make just one game, 5 billion is too much. I think 2 billion is enough. Defense Minister Bae Yunbong was silent for a moment. Asterisk 5 billion won is enough money to pay 10,000 soldiers' salaries. But good things are good, wouldn't it be better to go big like that? After thinking about it, he opened his mouth. It's made for publicity, so why don't young kids like it if you make it as good as possible? If you enjoy the game, you will want to enlist in the military, train with your comrades, and try shooting a gun. Yes. It was also stated in the report. Haha. There was such an easy way to do it. When the defense minister burst into laughter first, the atmosphere suddenly became friendly. The junior generals quickly said Abu's words one by one. At this point, college students will run to the Military Manpower Administration while playing games at school and apply for enlistment. I'm worried that they will stand in line to enlist at the Military Manpower Administration first. If not only soldiers but also non-commissioned officers and officers increase, the competition for long-term service will intensify. Defense Minister Bae Yunbong said willingly. Good. Give Jin Hu-kong 5 billion won and tell him to make one properly. When the solution came out, I felt as if I had lost a sick tooth. He made a cool swing with the driver. I received a call from President Lim Soo-mi and headed to the Salon Hotel to attend the MPizza General Assembly in Korea. To the presentation of the future management strategy and vision, President Lim Soo-mi invited all the store owners and employees. Although there was a halo of Seosong Group, it was the managerial ability of President Lim Soo-mi that made the hotel and duty-free shop business this much. Thanks to that, MPizza was also growing rapidly. Its market share is still low compared to Dice Pizza and Pizza Hut, but sales and net profit per store are more than doubled. In fact, people who want to open a franchise are lining up. However, since the initial cost of starting a business such as robots and household installations is high, it is being cautious about expanding branches. For this reason, branches were established mainly at directly managed stores rather than affiliated stores. A characteristic of the Korean restaurant industry is that when one item is released, franchise stores are poured out all over the country. Other franchisees appear, copy the same and open a store, and then collapse in an instant when the fashion passes. It is said that you have to paddle when the water comes in, but it is like boats tangled in a narrow river trying to row at once and sinking together. Fortunately, MPizza was free in that regard. You can properly copy the menu, but it is impossible to copy the pizza robot, oven truck and oven motorcycle. Upon arriving at the Salon Hotel, President Lim Soo-mi came directly to meet him. You had a hard time traveling to Europe. What? I'm going to have dinner with my mother after it's over. Do you have time? Of course. I heard it from my mother. There were already a lot of people in the hall. As soon as I entered, the inside became quiet and all eyes were focused on me. Everyone looked surprised. It is as if the students are chatting with each other and the professor has entered. Fortunately, I saw a familiar face and I approached him and greeted him warmly. When did you come? He got up and took my hand. I just came too. This is Kim Jae-hak, my military shooter and the first store owner. Seeing his playful smile, he seems to have regained his former bright personality. How is business these days? Compared to the beginning of the intervention, it has fallen a little, but it is steadily going well. The local business district has also been revived. That's fortunate. The income he earns now is more than that of executives of any large corporation. Thanks to the good business, the borrowed money was already paid back. Jae-hak Kim introduced the people he was sitting with. This is our staff. The two men, who appeared to be in their 20s, got up and greeted each other. Good morning. Nice to meet you. One had burn marks on his face, and the other was unable to move his right arm at all. Probably because of an accident in the military. When I brought MPizza to Korea, I asked him to hire an army and police officer first, and President Lim Soo-mi kept that promise. Excluding female employees, More than half of male employees were recruited as senior military and police officers. So it was easy to find people with disabilities in the hall. Jae-hak Kim asked cautiously. Can we take a picture together? Why? No, because I said that I was with Kang Jin-hoo now, so my girlfriend didn't believe me. Can you please send me a photo? I was surprised. Do you have a lover? Who are you? Kim Jae-hak said as if embarrassed. I am a nurse who works at a nearby hospital. He often comes to the store for pizza and by chance we got to know each other. Good for you. He showed me the pictures we took together. She's quite beautiful. You're prettier than the lover I've met in the past. Read more at wuxiax.com. Who? There is. He wore rubber shoes upside down when he was corporal. Alas. Him. They got married recently. When I took a picture with Jae-hak Kim, other people also asked for it one by one. I gladly took a picture with them. Some people expressed their gratitude that they are receiving support for rehabilitation and treatment through a foundation jointly established by OTK Company, Seosong Group and Won Group. The employees at Kim Jae-hak's store also asked for a picture of him. One employee suffered full-body burns in the explosion of a self-propelled artillery, while another employee was treated at a military hospital and was given a drug that left his right arm paralyzed. I, too, was not like anyone else from the perspective of the accident. Anyone who has served in the military has had at least one experience of almost getting seriously injured. It's partly because he handles dangerous weapons, but it's because he's doing things he wouldn't normally do. You twist your back while lifting a heavy object or you fall from a high place and break your limbs. In addition to being injured or disabled, many soldiers lose their lives. In a way, you might be lucky just to have been discharged from the military with all your limbs intact. Fortunately, both were registered as nationals of merit. Considering that most of them are eliminated and the tough lawsuits go on, you can say you are lucky. When they are taken away, they are the children of the state, and when they are injured, they are the children of others. Some even force them to discharge because they do not want to pay for treatment. Kim Jae-hak said with a look as if he had lost his mind. Well, the Ministry of National Defense is not like that in a day or two. You say you don't have a budget every day, what do you do? I remembered what I had heard from Taekyu. It's not that the country doesn't have a budget. There are too many thieves. While I was working, a middle-aged man came to OTK Company. He was none other than the Defense Ministry's public relations officer. He didn't want to see me, but he decided to meet me because he was curious about why the Ministry of Defense had come to me. Aren't you telling me to re-enlist? I responded firmly to Taekyu's words. Then you should leave this country. For that reason, everyone will understand even if you change your nationality. He met in the conference room and explained the purpose of his visit to us. As you know, South Korea is a divided country and is in a confrontation with North Korea. It is not the end of the war, it is a truce, and it is not strange if a war breaks out again at any time. So there is no need to even talk about the importance of national defense. However, the reality is that young people who are volunteers for military service are reluctant to enlist in the military and avoid it throughout society. Will be judged. Therefore, by using game technology to enjoy the indirect experience of the military in advance, we are trying to relieve the fear of military service, promote the importance of national defense, and encourage enlistment. I plan to produce and distribute it, and I would like to request it to OTK Games. What kind of bullshit is this? It was so ridiculous that for a moment I thought I heard it wrong. When she looked at Taekyu, she was making a face saying, "Oh, I forgot what to say." It's safe to say that no one wants to join the military because they want to be in the military as a profession. So, why do people hate going to the military? Of course, if you go, you lose money, and if you don't go, you're left behind. The reason is that the monthly salary is not even that of a prisoner working in prison, let alone the minimum wage. Even if the monthly salary of a private soldier was the minimum wage, they would have thought that it was worth visiting. And if the wage was the same as the starting salary of a large corporation, they would have raised their hand to go. But the reality is that it is 30% of the minimum wage. Fortunately, this amount has more than doubled since the change of government. If you say, "Are you going to the military to make money?" There may be people who think, "I am going to protect the country and its people." So why are parliamentarians paid salaries? It's all about serving the country and its people. The important thing I realized after going to the military is that it is better not to go to the military if possible. There are many reasons why chaebols, politicians, and celebrities avoid military service while wearing a flag. At that time, I had no choice but to go because I had no money and no support. But if I had a lot of money like I do now, I would not have thought about it seriously. Of course, there are those who say that military service is a precious experience of youth, and the military educates them that way. But the precious experiences of life can be done more when you are free. Men from other countries live a good life without experiencing that. A research report was attached to the document submitted by the Ministry of National Defense's Policy and Public Relations Officer, which surprisingly stated that the reasons for refusing to enlist were negative perceptions of the military, not knowing well, and vague fear. So, would you want to enlist in the military if you promote it through games? Could it be? No one wants to enlist just by playing defense FPS unless they are crazy about the world. Anyway, if there is such a person, they are exempt from insanity anyway. If you really want to solve the problem of avoiding enlistment, you need to improve the various absurdities in the unit and raise the treatment and wages of the soldiers. Of course, even if you do that, you won't really want to go, but you can change what you don't really want to go to the point you don't want to go. In any case, the conclusion is that the premise is wrong. Since the premise is wrong in the first place, such a garbage conclusion is inevitable. I was curious, so I asked, "How was this research report made?" We placed an order with the service, conducted a survey on university enlisted candidates, and made it with expert advice. What is the cost? I heard about 4 million won. 40 million won for this garbage report? Even if there is no money to pay the soldiers' salaries, this kind of money seems to be overflowing. There is no money in the world as easy to spend as taxes. Take you said as if to listen. It's a big deal these days because young people don't get married with love, so if the Ministry of Health and Welfare makes it and distributes it, it will be solved. I nodded. If it was made entirely of 19 gold, it would greatly help to increase the fertility rate. Thinking it was a joke, he burst out laughing. Haha, that's a good idea. The purpose of the development is to the point of being amazing, but that was nothing compared to the development plan. The number of developers is 10, the development period is 2 years, the budget is 5 billion won, right? That's right. The minister said that it would be desirable to produce a game that can be linked to PC, mobile and VR in line with the current trend. Even VR with this money. For a moment I was about to cry. 10 people to make it? Are you sure you're mistaken for making a game with the punks burning CDs in Yongsan? Hyun was amazed. Hey, 5 billion each. President Shigeru Ichikawa should have heard this in person. It doesn't seem like it will stop even if he immediately slaps his opponent's ear. As if he hadn't noticed the situation yet, he continued to explain with a smile. If you can make a good game and promote the importance of national defense, what does it matter no matter how expensive it is? The Ministry of Defense has a plan to link defense FPS with esports. Now I was so shocked that I couldn't even speak properly. Esports. Yes. The National Defense League will be held by putting on vacation permits within the military base, and the league will also be held in the private sector to make it a global competition. And by broadcasting it all over the world, I plan to catch 2 rabbits at once, generating revenue and promoting the armed forces. Is everyone in the Ministry of National Defense just sitting on their heads? In order to make a specific game an esports event, it must be enjoyed by many people as well as continuous investment and promotion. To think that you can play esports just by making it shows how funny you think about games. I think it will cost a huge 5 billion won, so it has to be done through competitive bidding, but isn't the quality of the game more important than the price? So, I want to proceed with a private contract with OTK Games. If anyone hears it, you'll think it's a great favor. Seems that you are making a huge mistake. I asked Taekyu. How much do you think it will cost to make this? Taekyu crossed his arms and thought for a moment. There may be some differences depending on the quality, but if you make VR, wouldn't it cost 80 people to produce and at least 70 billion won? He was startled by our conversation. Yes. 700 billion. No, what kind of game is worth 70 billion? The Vermorpk being produced now costs over 10 trillion won. He opened his mouth wide and didn't say anything. I looked at him and asked, "What are you going to do? Would you like to sign a contract?" Then he wiped the sweat from his forehead with his handkerchief and said, "Hey, let's go back and discuss." In fact, no matter how the game is made, high-ranking people in the Ministry of Defense will not be interested. So, you probably did this without knowing it well. It was a plan. The biggest problem with this project is not the cost. Even if it costs tens of billions of dollars to make it, who the hell is going to play a game made to promote the military? To be honest, it's just a waste of tax. I remembered Kim Jae-gak and the police officers I met at the Mpitsa General Assembly. They were badly injured in the forcibly taken in the army, and they have to live with disabilities for the rest of their lives. However, they were not even properly compensated. There are not only one or two people who have been like that, but who would want to enlist after playing a few games? I put down the plan and said, "Please go back to the Ministry of National Defense and tell me, if you have money to spend on such nonsense, please improve the treatment of the soldiers and support the soldiers who were injured while serving." The Ministry of National Defense's policy and public relations officer blushed, but returned without anger or objection. I was suddenly interested, so I searched for some materials related to the Ministry of National Defense. Which government department is the most closed? The Ministry of Defense, of course. Due to the nature of the military, it is separated from society and has little interaction with other ministries. It also has independent judicial powers such as the military police, military prosecutors, and military courts. It also has the most assets and the largest number of people among government departments. Taekyu asked. It must be a lot of people because they are conscripted, so why do you have so many assets? These days, weapons are not worth a penny or two. Destroyers and the latest fighters cost tens or hundreds of billions of dollars. Dozens or hundreds of them are operated. And the land where the unit is stationed is also the property of the Ministry of National Defense. Due to the nature of confrontation with North Korea, units are concentrated in the area bordering the armistice line. And that includes the metropolitan area. As you can see, the Ministry of National Defense is the true wealthy man. The budget is also huge. It is a whopping 50 trillion won, which is more than 1/10 of the government's budget. The rate of increase is also steep. The reason is that the defense reform was carried out and the latest weapons were introduced one after another. What kind of people would say that they spend money to protect their country? However, if you can forget it, the defense corruption broke out. Seeing that they spend 5 billion won on making games to encourage enlistment, it's probably not even a penny or two to leak out like this. When it comes to the salaries of soldiers, they say they don't have a budget every day, but wouldn't it be possible to meet the minimum wage by collecting these money well? I called Young Ki-hong, head of the PR team, to the CEO's office. Please organize and upload some corruption-related data related to the Ministry of National Defense, such as corruption in the military and military service. Team leader Jong Ki-hong opened his eyes like that. For some reason he looked like he was surprised. What's wrong? He answered my question in a voice full of emotion. I was waiting for this day to come one day. The Ministry of National Defense should be thoroughly scrutinized. No, I have long thought in my mind that reform should be done. Taking a look. Come to think of it, did this senior also go to active duty in the army? Just by looking at his face, it seems that he had accumulated quite a lot of things during his military days. As a member of the same active duty service, I sympathize. I patted him on the shoulder without a word. At lunchtime, Ellie, who was in the building next door, came over. We ate the lunchbox we ordered together. Taekyu talked about the visit of the Ministry of National Defense and Ellie frowned. If you have the money to do that, shouldn't you take care of the soldiers first? I mean, while I was eating, Sanjiop Sr. came up with team leader Jiang Yihong. Are you going to be tempted by the defense ministry? Well thought out, that's a great idea. Yes. I never said that. George has to get it right. They don't need to watch. When I think of what happened to me in the real military, I wake up even now while sleeping. He looks like he doesn't know what to do. By the way, this senior is also active duty. After hearing the news, team leader Seo Sangwon also came to the CEO's office. Read more at wuxiax.com. Are you investigating defense corruption? No, I am not a prosecutor. How do I investigate? I just want to find out. Many soldiers will be eager to get rid of the national defense corruption. Have you ever been on active duty? Team leader Seo Sangwon nodded his head as if waiting for my question. I am from the airborne forces. Actually, the military is a lot easier these days. At the time I couldn't speak. No matter how much I roll, the helicopter rappel posture remains the same even at this age. Look at the military. Everyone started talking about where they came from, what kind of training they received there, and how much hardship they had to endure. When he talked about the military, everyone was very excited. Ellie looked at me with a surprised expression. Are all Korean men like this? I shook my head and said, only men who have served in the military. I looked at the material. Political power is changed through voting. But no matter who comes to power, the bureaucrats remain in office. And among them, the group that has been the most slow to change is the military. Military corruption have deep roots. There are several reasons why the military is particularly serious, although it may be that there is no corruption in other fields. The Department of Defense is an independent and closed organization. Most of the goods purchased by the government go through the Public Procurement Service. However, the Ministry of National Defense purchases them separately through the Defense Acquisition Program Administration. Also, other ministries order desks and computers, while the military orders special equipment such as artillery shells and night vision goggles. There are a limited number of companies that make them, and since there are no similar products on the market, it is not easy to compare performance and price. For this reason, there are many cases of private contracts with specific companies. Even if it's a competitive bidding, a few companies work hand in hand to share. As a result, bulletproof vests, combat boots with falling soles, and life jackets that sink in water are not common. Even if it is usually the case, if there is a real war, the Allies may be defeated due to non-standard equipment. The money is taken from the top, but the damage must be borne by the entire nation. If you forget it, corruption in the military and military affairs breaks out and public opinion swells every time and various countermeasures pour in, but as time passes, it becomes something that never happened and the same thing repeats itself over and over and over again. The government and business have maintained a close relationship for a long time. Therefore, it is impossible for a company to step forward and uncover the corruption of the government. But I am different. As there is no contact with the existing vested interests, there is no need to look at anyone. Korea's integrity level has improved a lot compared to the past, but it is not comparable to Germany or the Nordic countries, which can be called advanced countries. Although it is not clearly revealed, corruption are rampant within the government, which is wrapped up in the name of custom. It is because it has been so. I remembered the refugees I had seen in Europe and the police officers I had met at the M-Pizza Congress. No matter how much money I have, I can't solve everything in the world. But wouldn't it at least solve the problems around me? In the data created by team leader Jang Ki-hong, the cases of military abduction and military irregularities that have been revealed so far are clearly arranged. When he was in school, he was famous for making good PPT, but his skills haven't rusted yet. But even if the quantity is too much, it is too much. Body armor that can be pierced by bullets, combat boots with dropped soles and water leaks, combat uniforms with inflated costs, battle hats made in China that are faked as domestic ones, rifles with falsified test and evaluation reports, tank parts with forged test reports, self-propelled artillery parts cheating used ones with new ones, design flaws armored vehicles, sonars that don't work, etc. etc. Here is not the end. The budget was also different. He embezzled R&D expenses for missiles, robbed fighter maintenance costs, and took bribes from companies that supplied food supplies. A case of wasted budget would include 5 billion won for defense FPS development. That's all that's revealed, but how many things haven't been revealed? Taeyong nodded his head. I can see why the military pays less. I have so much money to spend, how do I raise the salaries of the soldiers? I have money to buy rogue weapons, but I don't have money to raise soldiers' salaries. I have the money to build a golf course for the generals, but I don't have the money to support the wounded soldiers. After spending all the money to spend, is there any way to have money? Budget is a matter of will. If it was absolutely necessary, I would have squeezed a dry towel to provide it, but I didn't even feel the need for it. At this point, the soldiers are only emphasizing sacrifices for the country and the people. I don't do anything myself, and there is nothing easier than shouting patriotism in words. A nation's growth rate will increase only by equitably and efficiently distributing limited resources. Conversely, decay is like rice worms that corrode the barns without you noticing it. Corruption in the government was also a major factor in the decline of the once prosperous Greece. It will be possible to raise the potential growth rate by eliminating the corruption remaining in Korean society. However, it is impossible to touch every government department individually to eliminate corruption. There is no manpower to do that, and the entire civil service society will protest. The most efficient way is the worker be white system. If you thresh a wrong organization even to its soul, the rest of the people who see it will fix the mistake themselves. This is where the Ministry of National Defense is perfect. Why? It has little connection with other ministries, and it is good to attract public attention. If the Ministry of Health and Welfare or the Ministry of Employment and Labor tell us about corruption, people will not pay much attention to it. But the Ministry of Defense is a different story. This is because it is an organization that most Korean men have been a part of at least once. And as progressives value integrity and conservatives value security, legitimacy can also be secured. What are you going to do? Isn't it the fastest way to induce a whistleblower? A closed organization has limitations in looking in from the outside. The best thing to do is to file a complaint with someone who knows what's inside. Whistleblowers have a positive effect in promoting the public interest of society by notifying the illegality and corruption within the organization. Therefore, it is a principle to protect whistleblowers, but the reality is that they are kicked out after being turned around. Especially the military is even worse. After making a whistleblower for nothing, he suffers from various lawsuits or is embarrassed. So don't let that happen. There should be a sufficient price for what is just. OTK company will receive reports regarding military supply and military corruption. Depending on the importance of the issue, we will pay a reporting fee of at least KRW 100 million to KRW 2 billion and guarantee reemployment. We will also provide legal support in case of a lawsuit. The Ministry of National Defense was stunned by the sudden announcement of the head of public relations Team Jong Ki-hong. In the meantime, there are countless politicians who have gone bankrupt because of their ties to Kang Jin-hoo. I did something wrong during the previous administration, so I tried to get along as best as possible, but Kang Jin-hoo pointed the blade in the face. An emergency meeting was held at the Ministry of Defense. Minister Bae Yunbong shouted in shock. What's happening? Why are you doing this all of a sudden? Have you not seen the comments posted by Cyber Command in the past? He also saw those comments. It was no exaggeration to say that it was a feast of various pad ribs that could not be put into words. It was a cyber operation, and he did it while collecting taxes. At that time, the officers were arrested or stripped of their clothes. Of course, only a few have been punished, and most of them continue to work after changing positions. Maybe it's time to go to the reserve army, isn't it? Or maybe you were angry because you offered too little money to make the game. Why don't you just give what you ask for now and leave it to the production? Anyway, things had already happened and I couldn't stay still. The Ministry of National Defense has sent instructions to the entire army to prevent any whistleblowing. Immediately, training was stopped in all units and training was conducted. The battalion commander and company commander gathered the soldiers in one place and firmly educated them that whistleblowing is an act of betrayal to the military and undermining the discipline of the unit, and that if there is any complaint, the unit should deal with it first. While Officer Jong Hoon was in the midst of training, some officers and non-commissioned officers had other ideas. If you report only one case correctly, it's like winning the lottery. They even guarantee re-employment for the tip-off fee. Maybe it's better to get paid after eating a bit of swearing. Isn't it only the one who opens his mouth first? Defense Minister Bae Yunbong expressed his dissatisfaction in front of the media. If you sell the Ministry of National Defense as a corrupt group in this way, which soldier will serve with a sense of duty? If the morale of the military is lowered amid increasing North Korean provocations, it will pose a serious threat to national security. The Liberal People's Party also agreed with this. Representative Na Kyung-yeon spoke at the National Assembly. Security is life. With the military we can be safe from the North Korean threat. President Kang Jin-ho's action to receive reports on military corruption is an act that weakens our military's strength and benefits the North Korean military. The government should step in and make a statement and prevent this from happening. But the public reaction was cynical. If you know that security is so important, you guys go to the army first. Hey, what kind of national defense are these guys who haven't even been in the military? Typical chicken hawk. I remember a member of the National Assembly who was missing from the military in the past, holding a thermos and shouting that this is a cannonball. A class that exempts all sons or leaves them to comfortable positions, and tells the people to sacrifice only. Send all members of the National Assembly, ministers and bastards to the forefront. The Blue House and the new political party were in a difficult situation. In the meantime, they have set out to eradicate corruption under the pretext of eradicating corruption, because if the defense corruption issue arises again, the government and the ruling party cannot avoid criticism. Not only the Defense Acquisition Program Administration, but also the Military Mutual Aid Association and the Veterans Association were outraged. These organizations, made up of active duty and veterans, have been colluding with the defense agency to secure various interests. It has been pointed out as a hotbed of corruption several times, but it has not received much audit. But suddenly Kang Jin-ho took the problem and fell. Director Lee Min-suk of the DAPA asked at an emergency meeting, "What are some typical things that the DAPA could be caught by corruption?" There are so many things that I don't know what to say first. OG. Prosecutor General Hwang Kyung-won secretly convened prosecutors. The prosecution is a powerful organization as it has investigative and prosecuting powers, and politicians and government ministries are afraid of the prosecution. However, the Ministry of National Defense, which operates its own judicial body, was an exception. It would not be an exaggeration to say that all the people, whether conservative or progressive, are disillusioned with the various incidents and corruptions that occur in the military. However, due to the nature of the divided country, the power of the Ministry of National Defense in Korea was strong, and no one thought to touch it despite numerous corruptions in the past. However, Jin-ho Kang stepped forward and aimed straight ahead. Within the prosecution, there were various opinions about how to move in this situation. But wouldn't the prosecution be able to investigate the Defense Acquisition Program Administration, which is under the Ministry of National Defense? An Song-nam, chief of the Seoul District Prosecutor's Office, said, "Then how about this?" "Like what?" "We are investigating private companies that are engaged in the military industry. While other government agencies purchase goods through the Public Procurement Service, the Ministry of National Defense purchases them separately through the Defense Acquisition Program Administration. It is easy to compare products such as ramen and biscuit, and since they participate in various companies' bidding, there is little possibility of corruption. However, combat uniforms, combat boots, backpacks, etc. are made in special specifications, so there are only a few manufacturers. Interestingly, even if corruption is discovered, no sanctions are imposed. In principle, the contract with the company found to be corrupt should be terminated and prevented from participating in future bidding. However, the DAPA made exceptions and continued to sign contracts. The reason was that there was no company that could produce according to the standard. This inevitably leads to corruption. If you are determined and investigate, you will not be caught in one or two places. If we do, the Ministry of National Defense won't sit still. What if I don't stand still? I can't stand defense corruption, right? Prosecutor On Songnam has never met Kang Jin-hoo in person, but he did meet his deputy chief Oh Tae-gyu. Thanks to this, he was able to get rid of the coin multi-level gangs, which had become a social problem, and received a great deal of media spotlight, and the prestige of the prosecution was greatly increased. When Prosecutor General Hwang Kyung-won seemed to be troubled, Prosecutor General On Song-nam strongly persuaded him. My opponent is Jin-hoo Kang. After Kang Jin-hoo started, in a little while the whole nation know the whole world's attention will be focused on it. He has to hit it now. Investigation is momentum. At that time, Prosecutor General Hwang Kyung-won made a decision. Good. Set up an investigation team and investigate all the companies suspected of corruption. After Kang Jin, her very existence was an issue maker. Again, the media around the world made a special mention of this event. As it is rare among developed countries that have a conscription system, the conscription system in Korea has become an issue again due to this incident. All Korean men are in the military, right? That's amazing. Even if it is conscripted, does it make sense to hire people with that salary? It's strange that Jin-hoo Kang was in the army with that money. Korea is a developed country enough, so why don't they treat the military properly? If you are sacrificing for your country, you have to pay the price. The Taegukgi flew in front of the OTK company headquarters. It was not surprising because it happened often, but this time many participants were wearing military uniforms. A reservist general shouted into the microphone. I condemn the pro-North Red Gang Jin-hoo. I condemn it. Tae-gyu, who watched the scene, said to me, I see you as a redneck. There is no way that the Ministry of National Defense will take this opportunity to root out the corruption. After all, everyone is in one place. It's something that comes up all the time when investigating corporate accounting fraud or corruption. They say that when the economy is good, they hold back successful companies, and when the economy is bad, they say, why can't we survive the economy first? Tae-young tilted his head. Then when will the corruption investigation be conducted? I mean, don't do it. The same goes for this. He already predicted that there would be a backlash, citing a decrease in national defense power, a decrease in military morale, and a threat to security. There is a way to solve all of this. How? An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. And aren't reds to reds. Next day, I purposely got off the road and walked into the office. Again, the reporters who were waiting immediately ran and held out their microphones. What do you think? What do you think about the concerns of the Ministry of National Defense and politicians? Please say something to the people. I stopped walking and opened my mouth. If it is just and honest, there will be no problem in receiving reports. On the other hand, if a person commits corruption related to military service or military affairs, it should be thoroughly investigated and punished. Former President Park Si-hyung said that the national defense corruption was an act of alienation and ordered intensive military reform. The person who said that was first arrested for various corruptions and is being tried. Reporters kept asking questions. Do you think the military should be reformed? I said, looking into the camera. There is only one reason to keep the blood of the people in your pocket, weaken your allies, and benefit your enemies. It is because they are spies or gangsters who threaten the security of the Republic of Korea. Therefore, protesting the investigation or defending military irregularities, Those who oppose the improvement of the treatment of the soldiers should be thoroughly ideologically tested and questioned whether they are connected with the forces that follow communism or whether they have received orders from North Korea. Reporters responded with absurdity. Pushing the opponent into a redneck was an invincible card in Korea. Just by taking out this card, you can attract supporters and push your opponent into a corner. It doesn't matter if the opponent refutes it or if it's confirmed that he's not really a redneck. By that time, the essence of the problem is blurred and only the color theory remains. That's why everyone likes color theory so much. If they ask for free meals, they are Reds. Even if they strike, they are Reds, and if they criticize the government, they are Reds. One interesting thing is that there are very few guys who have gone to the military for a guy who likes drip coffee. Originally, patriotism is not done with the body but with the mouth, isn't it? After a while, a reporter came to his senses and asked a question. What is the purpose of receiving the report? Aren't you thinking about entering the defense industry? Do you have any personal feelings for the Ministry of National Defense? Hearing this makes me a little nauseous. Since I've been in the military, there's no way I'm not feeling personal. Still, it would be nice to get rid of corruption. Even 10,000 bamboos that have grown arbitrarily should be cut down. These words were said by Du Fu, a poet of the Tang dynasty, which became famous again after being quoted by President Zhang Pinghua. As such, the eradication of corruption cannot be emphasized enough. It is an old saying that only the economy can be saved even if it is corrupt. Now, integrity is required to enhance national competitiveness. This is why companies can grow in countries such as Switzerland and the Netherlands, where labor costs are high. I thought it would be an explanatory bug if I said all of them, so I answered as appropriate as I could think of. Do you need a reason to beat the redhead? Jin Ho Kong shocking spies and rednecks. Choring the generals and lawmakers who are concerned about the weakening of the military power and the morale of the soldiers as rednecks. Absurd color theory. Liberal People's Party representative Yun Nak-young hands and feet tremble and tears at Kong Jin-ho's last words. As a public figure, careful words and deeds are necessary. Military groups such as the Veterans Association and the Military Mutual Aid Association held large-scale demonstrations and battled public opinion. However, public opinion generally supported Jin Ho Kong, and the public's view of the protests was not good. This is because there was a lot of public outrage over military-related corruption. If you disagree with what I say, you're all idiots. Actually, advocating for corruption in the military is between spies and gangsters. To receive money and deliver underperforming weapons or to embezzle defense budgets is to weaken our allies' forces. The times are getting better these days, but if it was in the old days, it would have been a gunshot. If you don't know anything else, all those who harm you in the military should be shot. What's wrong? According to former Defense Minister Han Mingyu, corruption in defense is a livelihood crime. To make a living for the shooting stars, only the soldiers are dying. But why are you doing this all of a sudden after the earthquake? Isn't that what he's doing when he goes to the reserve army? Hit and run in the military and hit and run again in the reserve army. Just don't be mad. Are you taking revenge like this for going through a hard time as an active duty soldier? Still, I admit that I went to the military. Wasn't it exempted after the earthquake? Surprisingly, the sergeant's full-time discharge. So you went to the reserve army last time too. I think I can buy a PMC and organize an army if I have the money. The Ministry of National Defense and Defense Acquisition Program Administration put all their efforts into cracking down on insiders. All scheduled trainings were also suspended, and mental education was provided for all soldiers in the Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marine Corps. Walked. Instead of finding and removing corruption, I thought I would keep my mouth shut. However, these efforts did not have much effect. Anyway, there is bound to be a limit to the corruption that ordinary soldiers can encounter. In the midst of this, the remarks made at the gathering of officers by Corps Commander Zhang Qiumeong were made known to the media. I will thoroughly search out those who report that they will forget their status as a soldier and take a part in the achievement of one's self. And I will show you a good time. Hey, how do you show the jailbreak? Do you even shoot? The class of the commander of the corps who said he would catch and kill those who report defense corruption. After this, I will organize a Northwest youth group in the army. 2 minutes minimum spy. It's red. A redneck has appeared. Why don't you drive a tank and attack the OTK company? Gazua, Civil War Gazua. Hey. You too. You can do well in a coup. As the criticism poured in, Corps Commander Zhang Qiumyong lowered the tale, saying, "It seems that the intention of the remark was misrepresented." When an EPA official complained that fish cannot live in too clear water, in an interview with the media, a lawmaker belonging to the National Defense Ministry said, "It's not wrong, but at least it's not something a person who emits pollutants would say was added." Soldiers in military uniforms were crowded in front of the OTK company headquarters. Apologize for the idiot's remarks. Communists back down. Guarantee the right to survival of veterans. Looking at it, I feel proud because I think that Korea is a country with freedom of assembly and demonstration. By the way, how long have you been doing this for so long that you are protesting with a flag like this? Ellie asked. Did Jin-Hu not see any corruption when he was in the army? I do not know. Too many. All in all, wouldn't a few nights not be enough? Tell me one thing. I immediately said what came to my mind. The HQ company administrative service officer went to the drivers and ordered them to put diesel in their car. Ellie tilted her head. Isn't it embezzlement to use military fuel for private purposes? Yes. It is stealing. He even made the soldiers wash the car for a weekend outing. But who would point out or question the custodian of that? Our government officials have always said that it is the duty of a soldier to make sacrifices for the country and people, as it is a habit, and we should think about what I can do for the country rather than the state doing something for me. However, there was a time when, in the political circles, there was talk of military pension reform. Then he foamed up and became angry. What did the country do for me? And he said that he was going to cut my pension. Even if the soldiers were to make sacrifices, it seems that they couldn't do as much as they sacrificed their own pensions. Well, for a person who forces sacrifices on others, no one has the intention of sacrificing himself. It's easy to force others to make sacrifices, but it's hard for me to make sacrifices. While we were all talking and looking at the contents of the report, an urgent breaking news appeared on the news. An Song-nam, chief of the Seoul District Prosecutor's Office, appeared in person at the Seoul Central Prosecutor's Office. Taekyu quickly pretended to know. That man is on TV again. According to Taekyu, there is a bit of a bureaucrat. Prosecutor An Song-nam read the announcement in front of the camera. The prosecution conducted a search and seizure all at once against 34 defense companies suspected of corruption. The prosecution set up a dedicated team to investigate the defense corruption, and the Ministry of National Defense strongly opposed it, saying it was overpowered. Defense corruption is a matter for the military prosecutors to take charge of. However, there was no way to stop the investigation as it was only targeting private companies. The Defense Acquisition Program Administration has the exclusive right to select military supplies and companies, and many companies have been supplying supplies for more than 10 years. This inevitably creates a strong bond between the company and high-ranking military officials. Retired generals received huge salaries and worked as advisors for defense companies, or even acted as a broker. I was punished for corruption, but I changed the company name and delivered again, passed the performance test even though it did not pass the performance test, changed the items that had to be bid for competitive bids to a private contract, changed the specifications to drive them to a specific company, and eliminated other companies. Even 3 companies were bidding, and it turned out that there was only one actual president of the 3 companies. When the prosecution started a full-fledged investigation with the data seized and searched, not only military generals but also lawmakers were caught. Reporters pointed their microphones at a member of the new political party. There is a suspicion that the company run by my brother-in-law put pressure on the DAPA to supply field tops. Is that true? Representative Choi Man-soo shook his head vigorously. It's something I don't know. I don't even know what my brother-in-law is doing. There is a transcript of the conversation with the director of the DAPA before the bid, so what happened? I will not answer any further. Reports kept pouring in and I paid the reporting fee as promised. From small things such as clothes and sleeping bags to large fighters and battleships. There are only small thieves and big thieves, and it is true that they are all thieves. The cases were different. Military corruption, embezzlement, bribery, waste of blood, etc. There were so many materials that it was difficult for us to look at each other. I had no choice but to watch it with the staff. The active duty veterans were all excited even at overtime. Sanjiop Sr. stuck his tongue out. No, you said you spent 10 trillion won on improving the dormitories of the soldiers. Where did you spend this much money? What barracks did you build with Remian or Perugio? According to the data, even half of that amount was replaced with new barracks. Nevertheless, the Ministry of National Defense said it was short of money and rather requested an additional budget. I can't reveal the budget usage because it's related to military security, so what does it have to do with security if you build an alternative building and put a bed in? According to the whistleblower's report, there were records of the construction company and the hammock. I took it really hard. Team leader Seo Sengwon also said something. If I had this money, I would have been able to meet the minimum wage for the soldiers. A few years ago, defense corruption broke out and the generals took off their clothes one after another, and even the chief of the Naval Chief of Staff was arrested. But nothing has changed since then. This meant that corruption stemmed from structural problems rather than individual faults. Next day, a guest arrived early. He was the Ministry of Defense Policy and Public Relations officer who had come before. I would like to request the production of the game I mentioned earlier. A defense FPS game to encourage enlistment? Yes. As I said before, the budget is more than 10 times what it used to be. Is that okay? He happily nodded his head. Of course. It is for national security. 7 billion won for such nonsense. Seriously, considering the amount of money I've wasted all this time, this amount of money would be just a joke. Just by looking at his eyes and facial expressions, he could tell what he was thinking. We want to prevent a situation where corruption is exposed by entrusting us with military service. Taeyong asked openly. Isn't this like a bribe not to disclose the reported corruption? Then he shook his head and hands at the same time. Oh no. Could it be? I'm saying this because I think OTK Games is the best fit for this project. Then can I just peel it all off? It's a bit. Hesitating for a moment, he said cautiously. If you need more production cost, we will do a little more review on our side. Read more at wuxiax.com. There is no way that money that did not exist suddenly arises. As much as we spend tens of billions on games, we cut our budget for other things. In the end, the damage goes to the soldiers. Taeyong groaned. Get out. New style barracks replacement project, exposed to corruption. Inflated the cost of the house and bed by more than 10 times. Inconvenient combat clothes and easily torn combat boots. There was a reason. Night vision goggles that cannot distinguish objects at night. Sonar test report manipulation. Acquisition of 100 million won bribes to active duty general defense contractor. Air Force colonel confirmed to have stolen 280 million won for fighter maintenance. Receive hospitality and close your eyes for used parts. When OTK company summarized and announced the cases of corruption reported, the media around the world paid attention. The conservative media, who had always been at odds with Kang Jin-ho, also focused on this. To that extent, liberals and conservatives condemned military corruption with one voice. Do you have any ideas or not? This is the reality of those who say that the North Korean threat is blatantly and security is blatantly. The soldiers said they didn't know when a war might break out, and the soldiers were stingy with their taxes. Now it seems like we're going to catch the whistleblower and show him the time. Defense corruption is an active transfer. This time we need to set the military discipline upright by shooting all the caught chicks. Some of the generals who were accused of corruption either took a leave of absence or fled abroad under the pretext of education. As public opinion swelled, the military prosecutors began an investigation with their backs pushed, and Defense Minister Bae Yunbong bowed his head deeply in front of the people. As the Minister of National Defense in charge of the security of the Republic of Korea, I am feeling a deep sense of responsibility and reflection in relation to various corruption cases in the military that have recently been revealed. On this occasion, the military promises to eradicate corruption through thorough reform and to be reborn as the people's army and a strong army. President Ha Chong-min ordered a major military reform, and as part of that he decided to change the purchase of general items except weapons and special equipment to the Public Procurement Service rather than the Defense Acquisition Program Administration. This weakened the authority of the Defense Acquisition Program Administration and was difficult for the Ministry of National Defense to accept. However, there was nothing to say as the defense corruption that had been moderately passed over and over again, and public opinion about the military was going to the worst. Along with the fight against corruption and corruption in the military, the issue of improving the treatment of soldiers was also discussed. Korea is a country with a minimum wage system. No one should be allowed to work for less than the amount set by the state. Therefore, both the government and private companies have established a wage system to ensure that they do not pay below the minimum wage. However, there is one group with only one exception: the military. Soldiers were forced to work for less than half of the minimum wage while living in a 24-hour unit. When a constitutional complaint was filed on this issue, a nonsensical answer came back saying that there is no need to pay the minimum wage since the military provides lodging and lodging. This issue has been controversial several times over the years. The Ministry of National Defense acknowledged that the salaries of soldiers should be at least equal to the minimum wage, but raised the practical problem of a lack of budget. However, it turned out that the money leaked from this incident alone exceeded hundreds of billions of dollars. The argument that the wages of soldiers could be raised even if the money was properly saved gained strength. Anyone who has ever been in the military would have asked this question at least once. Why can't the officers use cell phones but the soldiers can't? Why do I have to stay locked up inside the unit even after work is over? In fact, the reason is simple. It's because of money. All kinds of people flock to the military regardless of region, education, income, or assets. Therefore, it is necessary to block any actions that require money at all so that there is no sense of incongruity among the soldiers due to the asset gap. It's because it's gone up a lot now, but in the past, a sergeant's salary was less than 100,000 won. You may think that there is no need to spend money to feed and sleep in the military, but how can a person live on only rice? Even if you only buy snacks and drinks at PX, the money is quickly spent. Shampoo, skin, lotion, etc., as well as various cold protection items in winter, you have to buy with your own money. Because military supplies are small in quantity and poor in quality. Salary alone is not enough, so they ask to send money to the house, and when they go on vacation they usually use pocket money from their parents. What a funny situation this is. He said he doesn't get money to protect the country but actually uses his own money to protect the country. Going into the military will waste not only time but also money, so everyone is probably trying to get out of the military. No one would object to giving the military the minimum wage. But when this talk comes up, there's always a budget talk. On TV, a discussion program was organized and sent out, and experts and members of the National Defense Commission had heated discussions with me. Look at what has been revealed. If only I had saved the money that was leaking in the meantime, I would have been able to raise the salaries of the soldiers significantly. Think. Assuming that 500,000 soldiers are given 1 million won a month, the budget will be about 6 trillion won. Based on the current wage system, 2 trillion won is already paid out, so an additional 4 trillion won is needed a year. This is an amount equivalent to 1/10 of the total defense budget, and it is impossible no matter how much money is saved. I increased the budget of the Ministry of National Defense by trillions of won every year, but where did that money go? Isn't it used for the modernization of equipment and weapons? So, Even if you have money to buy weapons, doesn't it mean that you don't have money to raise soldiers' salaries? The security of a nation depends on one fighter, one warship. If we reduce the purchase of weapons to raise our salaries, it will lead to a decrease in military power and weakening of security, and eventually this country will be reunified with North Korea. Based on that logic, why are the soldiers paid? If you don't pay the salary you paid at all and use that money to buy dozens of more fighter jets, your security will be that much better. So the current salary is enough. Are you going to the military to make money? An army should be an army. What does being in the military have to do with being in the military and having a low salary? Isn't it possible to lead a celibate life when the salary is low? With a certain amount of abstinence, you can develop patience and learn how to take care of yourself. If you learn to distinguish between when to stretch your legs and when not to stretch your legs, that is the foundation for being able to fulfill your role as a member of society. Still, there are many accusations that this government will increase my salary, let me use my cell phone, and increase my number of nights out, so I am a member of the Tang Army. U.S. soldiers are paid several times more than Korean soldiers, carry cell phones and go out on weekdays. So as you said, are the U.S. troops also Tang troops? No, I mean, the lawmaker who said that was also exempted from the military, so he must have learned patience, how to take care of the top and bottom, and the distinction between when to stretch and when not to stretch. As a member of society, I have no foundation to play my role. So what do you do as a member of the National Assembly? What, ma? Do you want to play with me now? The resignations of incumbent generals followed. If embezzlement and bribery are discovered during the investigation process, and the person receives a sentence of imprisonment without prison labor or more, or is discharged from service, the severance pay and pension are reduced. To avoid such a situation, the first step is to resign. The Ministry of National Defense tried to secretly accept the resignation, saying that crawfish are crabs. However, Kang Jin-ho said, "It is common for pro-North Korean gangsters to accept the resignation of officers who have acted in transfer and provide them with severance pay and pensions. If anything like this happens, please report it." The Ministry of National Defense announced that it would not accept resignations of those involved until all investigations were completed. Those who commit corruption have no idea what to say, but there are no graves without excuses in the world. I didn't come to the military to play, and when I was in the military, I had no complaints even though I wore worse clothes than that. It's okay to eat meals past the expiration date because people in their 20s digest it well. The U.S. military buys all kinds of combat boots and uses them. It's free, so what's so bad about it? The seniors had no problem even after eating more, so why are you doing this to us? For decades, I have sacrificed and devoted myself to the country and people, looking only at the country and the people, but it is too unfair to be punished for such a mistake. He even angered the people by saying, "If there is a war, the U.S. military will fight it for you, so there is no problem even if you use a weapon with a slightly inferior performance." These bastards are still out of their minds. Hey, anyone who hears it would think it was forced labor or free service. What kind of sacrifice and devotion are you taking all your paychecks and eating them and treating them like private soldiers? Taxes paid to you are not worth it. Spit out all the money you've been hurting. If the U.S. military is going to fight, just disband the army. Shooting is the only answer. No bullets. Let's stab it with a bamboo spear. As public opinion swelled, the civil servants became nervous all at once. Ministers of each department set out to catch up with discipline. Official notices have been issued urging them to be careful about even the smallest entertainment and social gatherings that have been held in the name of custom. Everyone was dissatisfied, but after seeing the stars of the Ministry of National Defense hung up one after another, no one was able to speak up. There is no law prohibiting Kang Jin-ho from doing the same thing again. He even went up to the Prime Minister and ordered the eradication of corruption, and major reforms began. In fact, it is true that Korea's integrity level has improved significantly. However, it was also true that it still fell short of the people's expectations. Credit rating agencies such as Moody's and S&P evaluated this positively. This is because if corruption is eliminated, administrative efficiency will increase, and it will greatly help to attract and revitalize investment. When I opened my eyes, I was alone in bed. I got up. Going downstairs, I saw Ellie sitting on her couch, drinking her coffee. When did you wake up? I exercise in the morning and wash up. That's why my skin and hair were still moist. Ellie is pretty today. I am diligent even on weekends. I've been busy these days, so I haven't been able to exercise much. I have to do it when I have time, like today. I also made coffee in the kitchen. When I first moved into this house, I thought it was huge, but now I don't think so. It just feels right. If you ask me to live in the house I used to live in, I won't be able to. Looking at this, it seems that humans are definitely animals of adaptation. I looked out the window in the living room. Looking at the sunlight and the green garden, I realized that summer was approaching. Will it be very hot this year? We were drinking coffee together and Take-You in training clothes came out to the living room. Why were you late yesterday? I met Enrique. What did you do? He said he wanted to go to Neverland, so it was good to go and watch the parade together. Oh yeah. This is a theme park run by the Song group and I went to play with Ellie before. Princess Enrique has a pretty and cute appearance. Besides her, she has a lively personality and she likes games, anime and cosplay. Therefore, she is the ideal type that comes out of a dream for men who like games and anime. Again, not long after transferring to Hankook University, his popularity exploded among engineering students. It is said that she received a lot of promotions and debuts in the entertainment industry. She refused, saying that she wanted to focus on her studies. In fact, they seemed to be having a hectic day whether to follow the lecture or learn Korean. Nevertheless, Take-You and I met frequently. During that time we became close friends, and Princess Enrique naturally called Take-You Appa. He's really old, so he's right. But why do I keep calling you Seo? Thinking so, Take-You said something out of the ordinary. I feel like this these days. What do you think? Don't you think I am popular with women? Huh. Generally speaking, it is highly likely that men are mistaken. But if the person speaking is Take-You, the story is a little different. Just by looking at his face, he doesn't look like he'll be popular at all. But judging people based on their looks is stupid. At least you have to look at the property and judge it. Take-You is the second largest shareholder of OTK company and the second richest person in the world. The halo was truly amazing. A person's charm is not just one, but a combination of everything. Appearance, personality, knowledge, habits, manners, speech, occupation, assets, etc. Therefore, having a lot of money is definitely the charm of Take-You. He didn't inherit it, but especially if he earned it with his own abilities. In fact, even when he was in Europe, many women asked why Take-You didn't come with him. That's why Take-You's popularity was worldwide. His fortune is post-Korean, so his popularity is global, right? Why do you think so? Ellie asked quickly. Tell me now. It's nothing special. We were having dinner together yesterday and Enrique suddenly asked, Appa, what are we doing? At Take-You's talk, Ellie and I looked at each other's faces. Ellie had her eyes wide open. Maybe my face isn't that different. What are we? Really, what in the world did you ask this question? So what did you say? I didn't know, so I said I'd think about it. It's certainly not an easy question to answer, because there are so many different interpretations. In order to give the right answer, it is necessary to first accurately understand the intention of the questioner. What do you think you are? Take-You pondered for a while and then he said, Some. Language articulates not only the physical but also the ideological. For example, there is no such thing as a baseline that clearly distinguishes between morning and afternoon and between breakfast and lunch. The same goes for human relationships. For example, if you say that you became a lover from a friend, it is difficult to clearly distinguish between the extent of the friendship and the beginning of the lover. The funny thing is that there are more and more cases like this, so the term some has been newly created. And the term again serves to spread the phenomenon. In the past, from friends to lovers, now we are in a situation where we have to go through a stage called something in the middle. Do you know what a thumb is? At my question, Ellie nodded her head. Of course. She didn't know what she was talking about when she first heard the words, someone, and someone, but now she knows for sure. It's like my giant, it's like mine, not mine, or asterisk closer than friendship, farther than love, not a lover and not a friend kind of relationship. Read more at wuxiax.com. I understand correctly. There are many such concepts in foreign countries. But a thumb is an unstable relationship. Right. It has direction rather than certainty. A friend or lover is the purpose of the relationship in itself, and it is stable. On the other hand, the relationship of a thumb can be a process but not an end. Because of this, there is a tendency to always move in any direction. If you move backwards, you just go back to being friends or a man and woman, and if you move forward, you develop into lovers. In fact, after meeting for a while, you should confess that you want to date or stop dating, but they just met. If it was so frustrating, would Princess Enrique ask such a question in the first place? So, would it be safe to say that it was a phrase that I came up with because I wanted to build a stable relationship beyond the unstable relationship? Taekyu scratched his head and said. But come to think of it, Min Ha-young and Yang Hannah have asked similar questions before. What? I was surprised by that again. Why the hell is he so popular? As a friend, I think I want to do well. But why does my stomach hurt? Is it your mood? Ellie asked with a smile. What's wrong? It's not like I'm jealous of envy, is it? I shook my head resolutely. Yeah, it could be. I can't be jealous of Taekyu. So who do you like? Taekyu thought for a while with his arms crossed, and then she asked. Do you have to like only one person? Wow, look at this bastard talking. After this, they are poised to become naturalized in Saudi Arabia. Of course, they would welcome you there with open arms. A true friend cannot let your best friend walk the path of polygamy. This must be dried. I just cut it off. Of course, you should only like one. The results of the trip to Europe appeared one by one. The French EDF teamed up with Rosatom. It was decided to promote the development of TWR independently, but to recognize the Rosatom, which succeeded in development first as a standard. Although it has not yet received formal ISO certification, Rosatom's TWR is highly likely to become an international standard. French President Blanc worked hard to bring in OTK batteries, and I built his prestige by announcing plans to produce OTK batteries at CL Chemical and SSK Innovations European plants and supply them to Renault and Peugeot. And BMW internally decided to stand in the Keris camp. BMW is a world-renowned luxury car. However, in the ultra-luxury car market, which costs more than $100,000 per unit, the reality is that it is being pushed behind by Mercedes-Benz and Porsche. The strategy is to preoccupy the electric large car and electric luxury car sector. Even if only BMW turns around, the cooperation of the three German companies will be broken. Carlos and Samsung Electronics secretly negotiated. Meanwhile, Carlos was also busy moving. The unmanned electric truck ADT-1 was sold like a wing even before it was released. Companies with a large proportion of logistics put in pre-orders for hundreds of units by pushing ahead with advance payments. The core of ADT-1 is the battery replacement system. Before the year-end launch, Keris plans to build battery replacing centers across the United States. For this purpose, the algorithm built by Tenway was mobilized. Tenway analyzed the movement routes of U.S. logistics trucks to select the optimal location for the BRC, and calculated the amount of batteries expected to be needed. The unmanned taxi service is also on track. After driving without an accident during the trial operation period, California and Michigan first officially issued driving permits. However, as there are concerns about the adverse impact on the existing taxi industry, 15% of sales will be set aside as a fund for workers in the existing transportation industry, and the number and hours of operation will also be subject to state regulations. The stability of autonomous driving technology has been sufficiently proven so far. However, the biggest problem is the negative perception of people. Across the United States, there have been cases of deliberately threatening driving or destroying parked cars against driverless vehicles, and the police have launched an investigation. Regardless of whether it is practical or not, antipathy towards driverless vehicles was a task that had to be resolved. It is an unavoidable thing that happens during transition. If the conflict escalates, we will have to take measures, but if not, time will solve it. I visited the research center to meet Professor Ho-Min Kim after a long time. OTK battery production expanded and huge royalties poured into the research center. And Professor Ho-Min Kim, who developed the OTK battery, earned enough money that he could not use it all his life. Although he had become richer than he had been before, he was still sloppy. He didn't care much for money, as you can see when he set up a foundation to support basic science. Professor Ho-Min Kim personally brewed the mixed coffee just as he did when we first met. He said, "I've tried all the good coffees in the world, but I can't find a better coffee than this. Isn't it because your taste has been tamed?" Professor Ho-Min Kim said while drinking coffee. Answer: it's hard to get out of what's familiar. He conducted a joint investigation with the government about the recent ESS, energy storage system, fire. So what was the cause? It was all a problem. Batteries, power converters, software, operation management, etc. Probably because I had insufficient experience in operating such a large-scale energy storage system. So this time we fixed the problem and established an integrated management system. By detecting and responding to battery overheating or short circuit in advance, damage can be greatly reduced. ESS stores electricity generated by solar power or wind power in a battery and then sends it out. As it can stably supply renewable energy regardless of the weather, it is an essential facility for expanding renewable energy. I invested in batteries for electric vehicles, but recently batteries have played an important role in all industries. In the future, as technology advances and demand for batteries increases, it increases but never decreases. Companies realizing the importance of batteries are rushing to increase their investments. But with technology, no one could follow OTK batteries. Professor Ho-Min Kim continued his research on miniaturization. In addition to batteries used in smartphones and tablets, the goal is to make flexible batteries and batteries that are thin enough to fit into clothing. Battery is the semiconductor of the future. It will be more useful in the future. Battery demand is growing explosively, and each company is eager to secure talent. Other manufacturing industries are said to be in turmoil because there are no jobs, but in the battery industry, the difficulty of finding a job was severe regardless of whether it was a research job, a production job, or a sales job. In particular, the ransom for researchers soared. Researchers working at the OTK Research Institute also received a lot of offers for scouting with large sums of money. Some moved to companies, etc., but most remained. It is because they are already being treated the best in the industry, and everyone wants to learn while doing research with Professor Ho-Min Kim. I did it again this time. I saw the announcement yesterday that the salaries of the soldiers will be greatly increased next year, and support for disabled military and police officers injured while on duty will be increased. Everyone complimented me on how well I did it. I got a lot of thank you calls from the company as well. Of course, I ate a lot more than that. Now it seems like it is for any swearing. Do you have any plans to go into politics? After all, I think it would be fine to get into politics. Am I? Didn't you have a candidacy? Even just me, sometimes I get calls from all over the place. I will give you a nomination, so please run for once. Even if you go to an election, you won't win 100% of the time. However, there are areas where the New Politics Party and the Liberal National Party become their own vegetable garden. If you are nominated in such a region and run for office, it can be said that the election is almost certain. Carrying the Nobel Prize here and campaigning for the election would be an added bonus. Because Koreans like Nobel Prizes. I'm also busy with work. Why do some of the Chable presidents wear the National Assembly badge? Capitalism is one vote, but democracy is one person, one vote. Therefore, it is easy to think that elections will be held regardless of money, but in reality it is not. For example, suppose a landlord named A owns all the land in an area, and all the people living in that area are tenant farmers under A. If A, B, and C run for the election in that area, who will the local people elect? Regardless of who has the ability or not, there is no choice but to choose A. This is because if A who has lost the election becomes angry and refuses to pay any more tenancy, the livelihood of the peasants is at a standstill. Therefore, in countries where land reform has not been done properly and the landlord system remains, a significant number of lawmakers from local councils to the Central Assembly are landlords. And of course, landlords make and pass laws that are favorable to landlords, creating a vicious cycle that further strengthens the landlord system. Similarly, if a conglomerate feeds an entire region, the president of that conglomerate is elected with almost no votes. The reality is that no matter how fair elections are held, people cannot be free from money. When I enter the National Assembly, everyone will line up to grab me by the neck. Professor Haman Kim burst out laughing at my words. The New Politics Party and the Liberal People's Party are not the only lawmakers who are training me. It is a difficult world to live in for gray molecules like me. And you don't have to be a politician to do politics. Occasionally, when celebrities make political statements, they criticize them by saying, if that's the case, get rid of what you're doing and go into politics. But in a democracy, the sovereignty rests with the people. This sovereignty is not just about exercising your votes in elections. Economics and politics are closely linked, so everything I do is already political. To argue that you can only do politics if you enter politics is close to a ploy to keep people away from politics. In the United States, all kinds of celebrities such as global company CEOs, Hollywood stars and TV show entertainers reveal their political parties and candidates, and express their political opinions without modification. As a result, they are criticized by people with different political orientations, but that is also their own choice. Are you going to stay away from politics forever? That's another thing you don't know. Professor Haman Kim nodded. That's a good answer. Life is long and you don't know what it will be like. Do you know, will you run for president later? Please note that there is currently an age limit. I said jokingly. I have a long way to go before I can run for office, so how about you run? I'll take a picture. No. I have to go back to school later. Aren't you going to keep doing R&D? Professor Haman Kim shook his head. In the arts, academic achievement increases with age, but science does not. If you think that one day you will no longer be able to create new results, you should go back to school. If one of the students I taught did something I couldn't do, wouldn't it be better than that? Hearing this, he is definitely a scholar by nature. Suddenly, Professor Mohan and Professor Petrov came to mind. They both feel the same. Professor Haman Kim said with a smile. That's why I'm maintaining friendships with other professors as well. If you can't come later, I'll have to ask you to write a recommendation letter. Even if you say this, Caltech, MIT, Moscow University, and Korea University will all be in a hurry to take them here and there. Professor Haman Kim asked me, what are you going to do when you retire? I do not know. I haven't thought of anything yet. Even if I see the future sometimes, I don't really picture my future well. What will I be doing later? Well, I'm still too young to think about retirement. Not necessarily. It is said that Chairman Masayoshi Son had already made plans for his life in his late teens. Masayoshi Son, chairman of SoftBox, a Japanese conglomerate that encompasses IT, software, and mobile communications, made a plan to make money from his 20s to 60s to create a huge company and retire. Surprisingly, the plan became a reality without any error. If there's only one thing wrong with it, it's retirement plans. This is the fastest changing moment in human history, and he postponed his retirement because he wanted to work a little more. Before the OTK company was formed, Berkshire Cashier was the largest investment company in the world. The Berkshire Cashier relies entirely on the power of one Warren Boat. It is no exaggeration to say that the Berkshire Cashier is the Warren Boat, and the Warren Boat is the Berkshire Cashier. But Chairman Warren Boat is nearly 90 years old and shareholders are concerned about his health. He's likely to retire in the next 10 years, even if nothing like a sudden ill health happens. Because of this, Warren Boat has been cultivating a successor for decades, and told shareholders that even if he stepped down the next day, the next president would lead the company well. In fact, even if he retires, Berkshire Cashier will be fine. So what about OTK Company? OTK Company's growth into the world's largest company was entirely thanks to my investment skills. However, this came from foresight, not from investment techniques or insights accumulated through long learning and experience like Warren Boat. Investment techniques and insights can be passed on through education, but foresight cannot. You won't be able to find someone like me again. A successful investment company goes bankrupt in an instant. During the global financial crisis, historic investment banks, including Lehman Brothers, went bankrupt one after another, while Barings Bank, which has a 200-year history, went bankrupt due to one bad investment by Nicholas & Son. Can OTK Company continue to exist after I leave? Or will they disappear into history as other companies did? I am still young and have no intention of quitting my job right away. So there's no rush, but it's something to think about someday. I had a good coffee. Professor Haman Kim said with a smile. Come for a drink anytime. A premiere will be held in California ahead of the release of the big one. There have been several films related to Big One so far, but this is the first blockbuster that directly deals with disasters. Produced and distributed by Universal Studios and directed by Arthur Farr, the film features famous actors such as Brian Amadeo, Tom Shane, and Amber Sutherland. A charity party was planned along with the premiere. Hollywood stars, movie officials, celebrities, etc. have decided to attend. However, the person who drew the most attention from the public and the media among the participants was none other than Jin Hu Kong. All the attendees are celebrities who can recognize their faces wherever they go, but to them Jin Hu Kong was like a star. The richest man in the world and the hero who saved America from crisis. Moreover, he is still young and his wealth continues to grow. Upon hearing the news that Jin Hu Kong was attending, Hollywood stars brought papers for autographs, and young women decorated their looks with great expectations. Taejae said, I'm going to see a movie release after all. Yeah. I had heard that it was in production before, but I forgot about it after that. However, it is about to open soon. As it was directed by Arthur Farr, the public and critics had high expectations. I'm also curious as to what kind of movie it is. The reason I decided to attend the premiere was because I had a schedule in California anyway, and I received an earnest request from a film company. And another reason is that EDM Entertainment also invested a large amount of money in this film and it was distributed in Korea. If the movie fails, all the money is wasted. It would be nice to go with Taekyu or Ellie, but Taekyu doesn't like to sell her face, and Ellie used up her vacation last time to go to Europe together. I am very busy these days. Before I set off, I received mental training from Ellie for a while. You can't just look away because there are a lot of beauties there. Yes. Even if beauties seduce you, you have to ignore it. Can't you believe me? Ellie answered my question firmly. I believe in Jinhu. She just doesn't trust the girls there. Isn't this what men usually say to women? I boarded a private plane and headed to America. Taejae said. I'm going to see a movie release after all. Yeah. I had heard that it was in production before, but I forgot about it after that. However, it is about to open soon. As it was directed by Arthur Farr, the public and critics had high expectations. I'm also curious as to what kind of movie it is. The reason I decided to attend the premiere was because I had a schedule in California anyway, and I received an earnest request from a film company. And another reason is that EDM Entertainment also invested a large amount of money in this film and it was distributed in Korea. If the movie fails, all the money is wasted. It would be nice to go with Taekyu or Ellie, but Taekyu doesn't like to sell her face, and Ellie used up her vacation last time to go to Europe together. I am very busy these days. Before I set off, I received mental training from Ellie for a while. You can't just look away because there are a lot of beauties there. Yes. Even if beauties seduce you, you have to ignore it. Can't you believe me? Ellie answered my question firmly. I believe in Jinhoo. She just doesn't trust the girls there. Isn't this what men usually say to women? I boarded a private plane and headed to America. You must be busy, but thank you for coming. What? Thank you for inviting me. He is a French-American in his mid-30s, a rising director in Hollywood. The low-budget movie Cloverland, released 8 years ago in his late 20s, was praised by critics and succeeded at the box office, making his name known. As soon as the greeting with the director was over, several celebrities approached and greeted them. Indeed, innumerable requests for handshakes poured in. After greeting dozens of famous actors and taking a moment to breathe, a woman greeted me in a slightly husky voice. Jinhoo is much more handsome in real life than in photos. This time it wasn't an actor. She said her name is Angelina Tinter. She is the heiress to the granddaughter of the chairman of the Tinter Group. With the concept that she is the heiress of a beautiful conglomerate, she appeared on TV several times, and later even made a show named after her, which was a huge hit. In Korea, it can be seen as a general entertainment show from a chaebol family. I know he is 3 or 4 years older than me. She is over 170 centimeters tall, has a slim body and has a strong charm. She smiled and continued talking without giving me a chance to reply, constantly touching my shoulders and arms with her fingers throughout her speech. Shouldn't this be reported as sexual harassment? In fact, her male side is famous. She cheated every time and changed her lover. Even so, the reason why men are persistent is because they have both wealth and beauty, right? But haven't you been engaged recently? He was an actor who knew whether it was Jason or Johnson. But right behind him, a man who didn't know whether it was Jason or Johnson was staring at him. As I was thinking about leaving the seat, fortunately, a man spoke to me in Korean with a slightly awkward pronunciation. Hello, Seo Kong Jinhoo. Nice to meet you. His name is Stephen Han. He is a Korean American who was born in Korea and immigrated to the United States as a child. He was cast for my role in this movie. He's actually 10 years older than me, but since he's so young, it didn't really matter. And as the movie deals with the stories of ordinary people who face disasters, my role won't be that big anyway. Nice to meet you. We shook hands. It is an honor to be able to take on the role of Seo Kong Jinhoo. What? I am more honored. It is no exaggeration to say that he is the highest paid Korean in Hollywood, although he is of American nationality. It's nice to meet someone who can speak Korean in a place like this. As we continued to talk in Korean, Angelina seemed to have no choice but to go elsewhere. We drank punches and talked. I've seen a lot of movies that have come out. Many actors in Hollywood condemn racism and advocate equality. But Hollywood is more racist than anywhere else. Asians are usually portrayed as opportunists who only reveal money. That was my first role. I nodded. Well, whitewashing is also common. Whitewashing is changing a character from a different race in the original to be white in the movie. The reality is that it is even more difficult for people of color, especially Asians, to take the lead role. But now, thanks to Seo Kong, my perception has changed significantly. Koreans are welcome wherever they go, and the proportion of Asian actors has increased significantly. I too have been able to take on important roles in several films because of this. It would have been unimaginable in the past. I am glad to hear that. Stephen pulled out his cell phone. Can I take a picture with you? Sure. A Hollywood star suggests that we take a picture first. I'm famous too. Stephen said after taking the picture. If it's okay with you, I'll introduce you to a close sibling. I'm usually a fan of Seo Kong Jinhoo, but he said he couldn't say hello because he was shy. Of course I'm fine. Moments later, Stephen brought a blonde woman. She was a face I knew. Amber Sutherland. In this movie, she plays the role of the daughter of the main character, Mary Murray. Although only 20 years old, her acting career spans over 10 years. She made her debut at the age of 9 and showed off her acting skills by taking on her various child roles. And over time she has grown into a leading actress in Hollywood. What's even more surprising is that, while balancing her acting and studies, she enrolled at Princeton University. There are people in the world who have such beauty and various talents. Since she was a child, she has not had 1 or 2 movies that have hit the jackpot, so her fortune is also considerable. In fact, her fee is among the top 5 Hollywood actresses. I have also seen several movies in which she has appeared. She said with a very remorseful expression. Hello Seo Kong Jin-Hoo. I've always wanted to meet you once and I'm glad I got this opportunity. I've been a fan for a really long time. How amazing. I am a fan too. It's more beautiful to see it up close than it did in the movie. White skin, small face, blue eyes and blonde hair. He wasn't that tall, so he felt like a little fairy. She was also chosen as the actress most high school girls in the United States want to be like, and seeing her in person I think I can understand why. Unlike other Hollywood stars who repeat love and break up from her young age, she did not sow any rumors. She was simply known as a schoolboy who only studied and acted. Her Hollywood hottie Eric Sitoff hung on to date her, but her anecdote is notorious for her rejection. She held out her cell phone to me. Could you please give me your number? A Hollywood actress asking me to give her contact information. Really is like something out of a novel. I shook my head. I have a girlfriend. Amber covered her mouth and laughed. I know. She works as a Golden Gate attorney and she lives with you now. You know. Of course. She also saw an ad with her lover. She doesn't mean anything else and she just wants to be friends. Come to think of it, she told Ellie that she liked this actress before. Wouldn't she like it if I introduced her? Thinking so, a white middle-aged man with white hair and a beard came in with her chubby build, glasses and a beard. People all at once turned their heads to pay attention to him, and he opened his eyes wide and looked around him as if it was the first time he had been in a place like this. Then I made a face that I didn't know I had made earlier. Wow. They are stars. It was the same with Hollywood stars. Wow. Professor Mohan. I waved my hand warmly. Professor Mohan. The premiere has begun. I sat next to Professor Mohan and watched the movie. All movies were shot on IMAX film. For reference, Arthur Farrar is a director who knows how to use IMAX well. The movie started with a situation in which the United States was in chaos before Big One happened. The protagonist was an ordinary family. My role wasn't that big, but I still appeared in every important scene. Jin-Hoo Kong, Stephen Han, shouted while smashing the desk with both hands while visiting President Ronald, Paul Sapien. Silicon Valley has no silicon in there. The anecdote is already well known thanks to Ronald recounting it several times in an interview. Still, seeing it on a big screen like this in a movie makes me feel uneasy. Why did I say that over there? But I don't think I hit the desk. Well, let's say it's a movie. Afterwards, Jin-Hoo Kong, Stephen Han, had a shocked expression when the Big One exploded, and when he got on the Air Force One with President Ronald, Paul Sapien, he gave off a tremendous force. Kong Jin-Hoo, Stephen Han, who was reflected on the screen, said with a stiff expression, "As soon as possible, save people." Again, let's say it's a movie. Anyway, the Big One happened in the end. In front of the worst disaster, all kinds of human figures unfolded. People who commit crimes because of anarchy, selfish people who want to live on their own no matter what others do, people who do nothing and want others to do dangerous things for them. But more than that, there were many people who made sacrifices and devotion for others. The film portrays such diverse people well. In the end, the main character, Bill Murray, saves his family and dies. As the sun went down, the surviving families managed to reach the shelter. A lot of people had already gathered there. The movie ended with the flag fluttering in the distant sunset sky. Even after the movie ended, the premiere was quiet for a while. Everyone had a sober expression on their faces, and some burst into tears or wiped away their tears. After a while, a standing ovation broke out. I also got up and clapped. First of all, it's a game that everyone else plays, but it's also true that you can feel a heartwarming feeling. Just by watching the movie, the American Pong was filled with itself. Okay. America was such a great country. At the same time, I sighed in relief. It won't be ruined though.